So I've been kind of dismissive of burner missions for quite a while. I had heard that you can make 200 mil an hour running them, but they hardly seem worth the effort. You have to buy and train for around 8 ships, rock blinged outfits, and even then, they still have a slim margin for error. By comparison, you can make a similar amount of ISK from dual boxing and incursions, are covered by SRP, and you get the social aspect of doing it as a group. Unfortunately, CCP reduced the high-sec focus spawn rate with invasions, and I've been seeing more incursion downtime. So, I've been messing around with different activities and finally decided to revisit burner missions. And I found a setup that worked so well that I had to make a video about it. But for those that don't know, burner missions are extremely difficult missions that offer much larger rewards. Regular level 4 security agents will give them out, but getting them is random. Those who specialize in running them will turn down all but the fastest regular missions so that they can squeeze in more burners per hour. Now, I'm going to concentrate just on burners in this video, but I will provide a link to a guide by Anise or Amara that covers blitzing standard level 4s. Soloing burners does have a few advantages, but the extreme difficulty of the missions means that you'll need to train for and put together around 8 different blinged out ships.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12.
Of course, there is plenty of skill overlap between them, but training all those different ship and weapon platforms will add up quick. Not to mention the price tag that comes along with all those ships and bling. And even after all of that, burners are still difficult. You need to manage cap and heat, and there's often little room for error. And as if all of that wasn't enough, all of that bling will make you an attractive gank target. Of course, the upside is that you only need one account, and you can run whenever you want. On the other hand, dual Nergals require a much smaller ISK and skill investment, are less attractive gank targets, and make burners very forgiving. Unfortunately, not everything is all peaches and cream. You'll either need 2 Omega accounts, or you'll have to split profits with a friend. It also can't run the burner Ashamu mission. Now, 12 out of 13 ain't bad, but you will need to find another solution to run that one. Also, small disintegrator specialization is stupid expensive right now. Personally, I think it is worth the investment because, unlike ships, you can't lose skills, but 2 copies will currently run you 8 to 900 mil, and that is in addition to the dual Nergals and fittings, which will set you back 600 to 750 million ISK. Fortunately, however, that is still way cheaper than what all the solo fits will run you, and hopefully prices will eventually start to settle down on this stuff. So, the blackout caused more people to get into abyssals, which seems to have brought down the prices of lower end abyssal loot. I know the blackout is now over, but hopefully some of those players will stick with it and bring down the prices of higher end abyssal stuff as they move up the difficulty tiers. So, I don't know. We'll see. Okay. In an ideal world, I'd blitz missions using solo and dual Nurgle setups in order to find the true difference in ISK efficiency. But because of random mission assignments and random distances to the missions, I'd have to run for hours and hours in order to compensate for those confounded variables. Naturally, I'm not going to do that. Now, I do believe that dual Nergs will increase ISK efficiency, but I am making an educated guess. Anyway, they get a 3-second align with evasive maneuvering 5, a 5.5 AU warp speed as an assault frigate, and they can easily fit enough tank that you can roll with the hyperspatial velocity optimizer rig on all of your fits. So, this will reduce travel time over most alternative fits, sometimes by a rather large margin. Second, even without the ability to select damage type, 2 Nurgles would do a respectable amount of damage with no spool. And at full spool, each one of them will have the application of a frigate and the damage of a cruiser. So, the insane damage these things puts out allows you to finish most burners faster. Anyway, I made a chart comparing my completion times to that of Hateless Gaming, but first, a shout out to Hateless Gaming. He has some excellent solo burner guides on his channel, so definitely check him out if you want to know more. Anyway, he didn't show video for all the burners with Logi support, and he fast forwarded through some of the fights because they took so long. So, unfortunately, I don't have hard times for all of his missions, but from what I have been able to gather, things are looking pretty good. And quite honestly, there's still a lot of room for optimization on my fits. Like, I designed them to be cheap, easy to use, and to be viable on characters with less than stellar tanking and support skills. So, there's definitely plenty of room for people to push things further. All that being said, you will always need to swap out your low slots and frequently your drones and mid slots as well. Of course, this doesn't take a huge amount of time, especially if you keep a cheat sheet handy, but time spent fitting can add up over the course of a play session. But I've spent way too much time on this. Long story short, dual Nergals greatly reduce the barrier to entry for running burners and probably increase ISK efficiency, assuming you have 2 Omega counts or a friend. Alright, let's take a look at what makes the Nergal particularly suited to this job. First up, it gets a bonus to remote armor rep cap usage. This means that running a remote armor rep will use 41% less cap than a local rep when you have your remote armor repair system scaled to 5. Considering how cap hungry armor reppers are, this is a huge cap savings. And then on top of that, moving the rep out of the lows and into a utility high frees up a low slot for an additional tank or damage mod depending on need. Basically, you can think of the Nergal as having 5 low slots as long as you're spider tanking. It also gets a bonus to rep range, which makes it much harder for you to mess up and get outside of rep range. Now, it's not completely idiot proof. If you forget to get one move in or to turn on this prop mod, it can cause you problems. But a 20k optimal on the rep and solid resist greatly reduce the chances of a mistake costing you your ships. And as an added bonus, Dead Space remote armor reppers are often much cheaper than their equivalent local armor reps. For example, the Corelli A-type remote armor rep costs all of 10 mil. Second, a single Nergal can out DPS cruisers at full spool, so 2 of them are going to do some serious damage. In fact, they can do so much damage when fully ramped up that you can use 0 damage mods and still kill burner rats in a reasonable amount of time. This means that, if needed, you can devote all 4 low slots to your tank. Unfortunately, you will need at least 2 minutes to spool up to full damage, so you can't insta-blap things as soon as you land on grid. Instead, rats will die like John Green falls in love, slowly at first and then all at once. Anyway, disintegrators have better tracking than even blasters, so combine that with a web or 4 and you'll be able to snipe the nuts off of a mosquito orbiting at 1 meter. Next up, the Nergal gets a 4% bonus to all armor resist and has a relatively well-rounded resist profile. Like, you don't have any innate resists that are only like 10% or whatever. So, combine this with the ability to devote up to 4 low slots to tank, and it makes it pretty easy to tank the Nergal against any incoming damage profile. All of this means that dual Nergals can bring enough tank and spank to run any burner mission save for the previously mentioned Ashmoon. Oh, and do note that the resist bonus is tied to a prerequisite skill that you need to have to level 5. So, if you can fly it, you'll get the best innate resist that you can. Also, cap and power grid shouldn't pose a problem for most people. Power grid is often in abundant supply, and if your cap skills aren't up to snuff, you can compensate by micromanaging your remote rep and or prop mod. Unfortunately, CPU will often be tight, but there are a lot of ways to deal with that, such as by meting the mids or getting a CPU implant, but more on adjusting fits later. And I know I already mentioned it, but the Nergal gets a 3-second align, a starting warp speed of 5.5 AU, and can safely fit a hyperspatial velocity optimizer rig, which should reduce your travel times and increase your ISK efficiency. Anyway, there's definitely other options when it comes to dual boxing burners, but the Nergal's unique attributes make it particularly well suited to this task. You can think of burners as all having some sort of challenge or problem associated with them. For example, the Kruger has newts that you need to be able to deal with, and the Worm is extremely fast and likes to kite you out. Of course, some of the burners will repeat the same premise, like the Enyo, Hawk, Jaguar, and Vengeance all have logic support, so the main difference between them is their damage and resist profiles. Anyway, these are sorted by level of difficulty for the Nergal. Once again, I do not recommend running the Ashimu in dual Nergals at all. I mean, even if it is possible to do, the Nergal is certainly the wrong tool for the job. The extreme newt pressure can break your spool and prevent you from being able to rep in cases of split aggro. So, it's probably a much better idea to take something with a passive tank and weapons that don't use cap. Past that, the 4 Dramules and Supercarrier burners can get a little hairy, but even those with less than stellar tanking skills should still be able to run them. That being said, there are probably better options for running those missions, but the Nergal will get your foot in the door. Oh, and to give you guys a frame of reference, I consider the burners in blue to be no more difficult than regular level 4s. So if you feel comfortable with level 4s, you should feel comfortable running those burners with dual Nergals. Alright, let's discuss some common elements for all burner missions. First, all of them are gated, so feel free to warp to them at 0. Now, once on the gate, you should double check to make sure that you're clear of it. The last thing you want to do is to send your tunes in and find out one is dry humping the gate. Second, a 20k remote rep range is pretty good, but it is possible to get them separated if you forget to get one moving or to turn on his prop mod. Moreover, you'll have a brief moment of invulnerability when coming out of warp, which will prevent you from locking your Nergals up. However, the invulnerability period can be ended early by moving your ship. Because of all of this, I'll try to follow a certain order of operations when I land. And don't worry if you think all of this is a lot. There will be room for error, especially on the easier burners, and all of this stuff should become automatic with time. Anyway, you can actually initiate a target lock before fully coming out of warp, so that's what I always start with. And naturally, I'm going to be doing the same thing on both clients, one right after the other. Anyway, after that, I'll hit keep at range. I'll do that even if I eventually want to orbit the rat, as keep at range can help me catch fast-moving targets more quickly. For example, if you start by trying to orbit the Mantis fighters during the supercarrier mission, your ship will try to aim for the orbit path and not the Mantis itself, which can cause you to always be aiming behind it. Of course, the quickest way to catch them would be to use manual piloting to aim for in front of the rat's direction of travel, but keep at range is the lazy way to do it, the best lazy way to do it. Once you have both your turds moving, turn on prop mods, lock each other up, and establish reps. After that, you can deal with the rat. Finally, burner rats have a chance to drop faction loot, so it's definitely a good idea to check Rex and probably to bring an MTU on the missions with multiple rats. Alright, let's start talking fits. First of all, I have really good skills, so I tested the entry-level fits without abyssals, implants, drugs, or heat. Then on top of that, I tried to err on the side of caution when it came to tank. This means that you don't need godlike player and character skills to be able to run these safely. Obviously, better skills, implants, drugs, and more bling will help your ISK efficiency, but they aren't required. Second, I tried to limit module switching as much as possible. My initial plan was to design fits that only required that the low slots in the drones be swapped out, but that didn't work out too well. Of course, rigs and high slots will be the same for all of these fits, but you'll always need to swap out your lows and sometimes your mids and drones as well. Speaking of which, Alkalites and Warriors are the best drones to use for most burners and the second best for all the rest. For example, Hornets are the best drone against the Cruer, but Warriors are 92% as effective. Anyway, I recommend just sticking with Warriors and Alkalites, as that will reduce how much drone swapping you need to do. That being said, I did list the best drones for each mission for those who want every last bit of DPS possible. Also, don't freak out at all the faction and death space mods. I chose the ones that I did because they were so cheap. Obviously, all this stuff will add up, especially since you have to buy 2 copies of everything, but your total bill should only be in the 750 million ISK range. Moreover, you can save quite a bit by using standing buy orders. And I will cover customizing fits after I run through all the missions, but I suppose I should mention up front why I didn't list specific resist modules on the shopping list. That's because many modules of the same meta level will have the exact same stats, so you should just buy whatever happens to be cheaper. Of course, it wouldn't be EVE without exceptions. For example, Dead Space remote armor reps have different stats, and then we get the one that seems to trip the most people up, faction resist modules. As you can see here, Domination and Republic Fleet Hardeners actually provide less resist than the T2 variant. And as if that wasn't already confusing enough, here we find that it's different faction variants that are the oddballs with lower stats. So, the takeaway from all of this is that you should use the compare tool to make sure that you're actually getting what you want. Alright, all of the fits have their high slots and rigs in common. Naturally, the CPU rig gives us a much needed CPU, and the anti-kinetic pump helps to beef up our lowest resist. The Corelli A-type remote rep restores 32% more armor, uses 10% less cap, increases the optimal range to 20k, and uses 1 less CPU than the T2 variant, all for the low price of 10 mil. Naturally, that's a no-brainer of an upgrade. Now, if you need even more repping power, You can go with the Senti A-type, but it does have a higher fitting requirement and it'll hit your cap a lot harder. Of course, that can be compensated for by things like implants, better skills, and better micromanagement of your cap hungry modules. However, because it's more Nubro friendly, I designed the entry fits around the Corelli variant. Okay, so a faction disintegrator uses less cap, less CPU, gives you slightly more range, can use T2 ammo, and gets a damage modifier that makes it do about the same amount of damage as someone with a small disintegrator specialization 4. Unfortunately, it will almost double the cost of your fit, and it will make you a more tempting gank target. Personally, I don't think it's worth the price, but whatever you do, make sure that you train small disintegrator specialization so that you can unlock a Colt. It does 29% more damage than Tetrion, so it's definitely worth it. Alright, I decided to break this video into 3 parts. It was getting super long and I also wanted some feedback. Anyway, I recorded 2 clients running at reduced resolution so that they both fit on a 4K monitor and then plan on releasing the final video in 4K. Now, I can see everything just fine, but I also have a 50-inch 4K TV mounted right above my desk. So I figured I should probably get some feedback before I made the next part of the video. Also, if you're wondering about the weird resolutions on the clients, it's because they get title bars when running in windowed mode, which will cause them to overlap with each other when they're stacked vertically. So if you run at 1680 by 1050 and then move or hide the start bar, you only have like 2 lines of pixel overlap between the clients. So when I first started running clients on the same TV, that's the resolution I started at. And eventually I widened them to take advantage of unused horizontal screen real estate, so that's why my client resolutions are so weird. And yes, it is super annoying to switch resolutions. I'll have to move all my HUD elements around and the client will forget my custom resolutions for when I go back to multi-boxing. I wish there was a way to save your HUD layout and graphic setting profiles so that you could easily switch between them. And it would also be super nice if you could choose like where to anchor the client when it's in fixed window mode. Like running the client in fixed window mode at 1080p would allow you to perfectly tile 4 clients on a 4K TV if it weren't for the fact that they all anchor in the top left corner. I doubt this kind of stuff is something CCP will ever work on though. I just don't think enough people multibox to justify the work. Of course, maybe if multiboxing was more convenient and pretty, more people would do it. I don't know. Anyway, you're looking at footage of me running the Burner Talos mission. I filled my lows with speed and damage mods, and then used speed and sig to avoid taking damage. I also split my turds up, which eliminates the need to burn to a third Talos and cuts about a minute off of the site completion time. Alright, I've already made considerable progress with part 2. I've already recorded all the video and much of the audio, so I'm hoping to have it up within 2 or 3 days. I've also already made the Google Doc companion document, so check that out if you're chomping at the bit. Okay, that's it. Don't forget to support all your favorite content creators, and until next time, let's start calling banging 2 chicks at the same time dual boxing and see if we can't make that a thing.